All right, hello. How to connect your bass amp head to your cabinet. Also, amplifiers explained, bass amp wattage, and bass amp wattage for gigs. All of that right here, right now. Okay, so you're at practice and your 50-watt practice amp is just struggling to keep up, struggling to be heard, and it's just working too hard. You've got everything maxed out and you're just working too hard. You're working too hard. And we've all been there at one time or another. That's why you're here now. Don't worry, by the end of this video, you'll have all the information you need to make the right choice and save a little time and a little bit of money. Okay, so first off, how to connect your bass amp head to your cabinet. This is probably the easiest task, but there's some little minute information that will make a big difference and keep you from frying your amp and making some big bad decisions here. And all you need is a cable coming from your amp to your cabinet. That's all you need. But this cable, it's important that you get the right cable. They look similar. Your instrument cable here, your instrument cable and your speaker cable are two different cables, and there is a difference. Your instrument cable that you hook up to your bass is built different than a speaker cable, so there is a difference. You can't use your instrument cable to do that. That's when you could fry some components and stuff like that in either your cabinet or your amp. So make sure you don't mess up and use an instrument cable for that purpose. Use a speaker cable. And if you don't know the difference, a speaker cable, the gauge wire is a little bigger. You can look at it and tell a speaker cable, it's a little bigger than an instrument cable, but it's real close. So if you don't recognize that, another way to look at it is to check the label. All of these cables are labeled. Instrument cable for your instrument, that's only for your instrument, your guitars, your bass, your quarter-inch jack, and that's why they're similar. The speaker cable has a quarter-inch jack and your instrument cable has a quarter-inch jack, so they look similar, but they are different. So it is imperative that you use a speaker cable, not an instrument cable. Check it out. I'll wait. Now, they've come a long ways here in I think since like 1987 they started making these SpeakOn cables, and your amp heads have these connections in them that allows you to lock your cable in to prevent it from being disconnected in the middle of anything, or somebody's wandering around in the back and they snag your cable. They can disconnect that quarter-inch jack pretty easy. So they've come equipped, the new amps, well, since 1987 the new amps come with a SpeakOn connection, and all it is your cable has a lock. You stick it in there and you can twist lock it, but it's called a SpeakOn. It was created by Nutrix, but it's a twist lock. So you stick it in there and you can twist it and it won't come out. So if you've got somebody wandering around the backside and they snag your cable, you don't have to worry about it coming disconnected. All you got to worry about is it slamming your amp head off your cabinet onto the floor. So I still use the quarter-inch jacks. I just make sure nobody's back there fooling around. But the SpeakOn cable has some other benefits as well. It has internal connections, so you don't have to worry about them getting corroded and anything like that. Where a quarter-inch jack, you've got to worry about that. It's somewhat exposed, and it's not the best connection. It is a great connection, but the SpeakOn is a very good connection, and it's self-cleaning. The SpeakOn cables are self-cleaning. Once you by inserting them into the amp and disconnecting, they're self-cleaning. So that's something. The quarter-inch jacks, I've never seen it happen, but I've heard them talk about possibility of fire, but I don't think there's enough wattage coming through there or enough current coming through there to make that happen. But I guess it's possible. There's just that minute, if there's 1% chance, then it's something to think about. So rather be safe than sorry. Don't take that chance. Also, they're recognizable. You'll know that this is a speaker cable and not an instrument cable because of the tip on the end of it. It looks different. The blue and black is their MO. They're definitely known for that, and they all look the same. So they're blue and black. You'll know right then off the bat that, hey, this is my speaker cable, or this is a speaker cable, and your guitarist ain't grabbing your cable and running his, and then you can't find your speaker cable. So, there are some benefits to them. All right, so that's just how to connect your bass amp head to your cabinet. As simple as that. There's not a whole lot going on there to that aspect of it, but there is a lot more, and that's what I'm gonna get into. Bass amp wattage, I'm just going to dig into this one real quick. Bass amp wattage for gigs this is the standard. This is my rule of thumb. If I'm playing a gig, I want to be able to have plenty of headroom, and I don't want to be maxed out on my volume and my gain. I don't want it maxed out just so I can be heard. I want headroom. I just want that thing on 2 or 3, and then I'm still able to cut through, to just stick with everybody. I don't want to, I don't want to be overpowering, or I don't want to be underpowered either. So that's why I go with a rule of thumb of 300 watts. If you can produce 300 watts with your bass amp head, you're good. You're good. You're going to be good for just about any gig out there, any venue, and you don't have to crank it. You just keep it down low, but you've got all that headroom there in case something goes on and you need a little more extra. You've got it there. So 300 watts is more than enough. I mean, people will say, "Oh, you need 100 watts, or you only need 50 watts." But just be on the safe side. Get you what make this a one-time deal, one-time purchase, and just get it to where you don't have to come back, 3 months from now. You got a bigger gig and you got to get another bigger head, because the 50 watt or the 100 watts just not gonna working it too hard. So just go right off the bat. Go to 300 watts, and that's my bass amp wattage for gigs standard. It's 300 watts. That's the safest bet. It's more than enough. You don't need the 300 watts. You're most likely not going to need 300 watts, but you've got it there in case you need it, and you've got plenty of headroom to work with. This gets us in another category here, the bass amp wattage and amplifiers explained. Now we're going to get into the dark truth about bass amp wattage and how these companies market their bass amps, and how it can get confusing where it shouldn't be confusing, but it is. And that's what I'm gonna help you here. If you watch this video, you won't be confused by this anymore. You'll know exactly where to go and what to look for in looking for your bass amp. So that's where they get us, is these companies know that we love loud. We want everything loud. That's kind of where we started with amplification, is because we wanted it louder. We want to be able to be heard. So they know that this is just something born in us and bred in us. We want loud. And so they sell us, their selling point is loud. So you'll see, you're looking at bass amp heads. Not all these companies do it. The bigger brands, the bigger names don't do it. The ones that have been around, that have built a reliable, reputable company, they don't use it to the extreme as some of the newer companies, that don't move as much volume, So what you'll see is they'll advertise 1,000 watt head, and you're thinking, all right, 1,000 watts, and that's the same price as this one here that only says 500 watts. So there they got you. You're gonna go for the 1,000 watts because you got more than enough. You won't need any more ever again. But you look at the fine print, you find out that 1,000 watts is a peak burst. That amp might have hit 1,000 watts for a half a second at one point in time, just enough to get them to be able to label that as 1,000 watt, and not be in false advertisement or be sued because it doesn't do 1,000 watts. But it can produce 1,000 watts in a moment, and that's it. A peak burst is what they call it, and it can get there, but you're never going to get there, but maybe once in a blue moon, and then you're taking a chance on, blowing your speakers. If it does peak out at that on you, you're not going to be able to do it. It's rare. These are done, that peak burst is done in a laboratory, and just in the perfect world right there that they've created. So that 1,000 watts, don't be fooled by it. You've got to look at the RMS. That is the root mean squared. That's the number you're looking for. And most of the time, if they say it's 1,000 watts peak, probably half of that is what your RMS will be. Probably. It's not always a given. It's not a given that that's going to be half of that number, but it's going to be in that ballpark. So what you're looking for is the RMS. Now, when you find that RMS number on there, it's usually, and most of your bigger brands, they'll advertise this as a PV Minimax 500, which is a 500 watt amp head at 4 ohms. So that's something else you got to take into consideration, is 4 ohms, and I'll explain that here in a minute too. But you're looking at that 500 watts, that RMS, that root mean squared number, is what you're looking for. Now, So now adding to the RMS, we need to know the impedance, the resistance that our cabinet is giving that amplifier. And most of your standard cabinets are at 8 ohms, but there's a lot of them at 4 ohms, and then some of them are at 16 ohms. So you really got to find out what cabinet you have, and that's usually labeled right beside the input jack on the back. You know, your 1/4 inch speaker cable input jack usually tells you right there if it's 8 ohms, 4 ohms, 16 ohms. Some go as 2 ohms, so it varies. But the lower the number, the less resistance you have. So therefore, that 500 watts has no resistance. That 2 ohms or whatever it's rated at, 4 ohms, that means there's only that much resistance, and you will get the full 500 watts out of that. But if your cabinet is an 8 ohm cabinet, which the majority of them are 8 ohms, most likely if you go purchase a cabinet outside of that's not compatible, it's not with your base head, then it's going to be 8 ohms. But they do make 4 ohms and 8 ohms. Those are the two more popular ones, but they make all of these speakers all day long. So for the majority of them, 8 ohms and 4 ohms. And on that bass amp head, you got to look at that RMS. It might just say 500 watts, but somewhere in there there's got to be some more print down there that shows you at 4 ohms or at 8 ohms. And if you've got that 500 watts at 4 ohms and your cabinet is an 8 ohm, then you've got more resistance coming off of that that cabinet is giving that amp more resistance, so that 500 watts now breaks down to about 2/3 of the 500 watts. So if you've got 500 watts and your amp's a 500 watt amp head and your cabinet's at 8 ohms, typically it's going to be 2/3, so you're looking at about 300 watts right there. Okay, so that's how you look at it. RMS at how many ohms? What is an ohm? I could get into Ohm's law, but I don't want to put you to sleep. But ohms is just resistance. The definition of an ohm is resistance. So you'll see it. Ohm's law is just a simple equation. P equals I times E, which P is your wattage and your I is your current flow, and then E is your amp. So that's the equation. Simple as that, but it gets deep, so I'm not going to get into that. So now you know what to do when you're looking for your amp. You've got this situation, you got an 8 ohm cabinet, you got a 4 ohm cabinet. But if you'll notice, another good thing about the 8 ohm cabinets, because most of your heads have 2 outputs on them. You got 2 SpeakOn cabinets, 2 SpeakOn lock nut outputs, and they can go to your 2 different cabinets. So if you've got 2 8 ohm cabinets, you're going to get the full 500 watts right there. But if you've only got one, all you got to do is just run the one cable to your amp like normal, and you're just going to get 2/3 of that. So that's it. It's not a whole lot to it, but now you know what to look for when you're searching for your amp, and you've got to do some research. So hope I made that helpful for you. If I did, help me help you. Hit that like button. And I'm Donald Witt with iwannaplaybass.com. Jump over there, subscribe, become a member for free. Get well on your way to reaching your bass playing goals once you sign up. And this is I Want to Play Bass, your YouTube channel for everything bass. Subscribe here, hit that bell. I've got lots of videos like this and more to come. So if you've got a question or anything, a comment, leave it down below. Let me know, and I look forward to hearing from you, and catch y'all on the flip-flop in the next video. So bye for now.